Hello and welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and you can help me keep this podcast running like a fridge by supporting it on Patreon. The link is in the description of this chat. This chat features Mindy Johnson, who is an award-winning author, historian, filmmaker, and educator known for her books like Ink and Paints and Pencils, Pens, and Brushes, and she is here to share more about the history of women in animation and how that has changed over the years, and her involvement in the upcoming documentary called Pencils versus Pixels, which covers the history of Disney's transition from hand-drawn animation into CG and the artists that helped make it happen. And just so you know, you can look out for this documentary called Pencils versus Pixels, which will be available on November 7th on Google Play, Apple, and all the other digital streaming services. So put that in your calendars. And now, without further ado, let's jump in. Hello, Mindy. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, Terry. Thanks so much.
More importantly, you're in Italy right now? How's the Italian
Yes,
weather and
Buonasera.
the festival?
I'm in Pordenone, Italy for the Pordenone Silent Film Festival.
Wow.
And you might scratch your head and go, what's an animation specialist doing? But early animation, silent animation is kind of a very cool thing here. And it enjoys a reinvigorated life. But it's really been an epicenter of film historians, archivists, restoration specialists, academics. It's sort of the hub for early cinema. And I was asked this year, deeply honored, to deliver the Jonathan Demme lecture, the main lecture, which I did on Wednesday, and spoke on one of my more recent discoveries, the Bessie Mae Kelly films and career of our earliest known female animator, or earliest surviving films of a woman animator director.
Wow. Yeah, I'm curious about that. Tell me a little bit more about that. How did you uncover this? You said you found it.
Years. I'd had a theory. Once I'd finished the Ink and Paint book, several people, dear colleagues, had pulled me aside and said, you're going to have to go earlier and wider. And I said, oh, I get it. Absolutely. And I received a very lovely award from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences to kind of continue to do that in a way. They sort of threw down the gauntlet and said, all right, what else?
Wow.
And I had a theory that just as Winsor McKay and Sidney Smith and the Terry brothers, John and Paul Terry, had their start in vaudeville. They would do lightning sketches, quick sketches, which were a big deal. You still see that today. It's a unique art form akin to animation. And it was a predecessor to animation in the vaudeville circuits of the late 1800s, turn of the century. And I thought, if there was a woman doing it, that may have been a place, that she would have also done work. Just, it was a theory. So I had been culling through early vaudeville materials and came across a tiny little article about a animated cartoonist. Thought, okay, Miss Bessie Mae Kelly. And it talked about her working at Bray Studios and Fleischer and Fable Studios. And I thought that was a little too much. I thought it was a little bit of hyperbole. And turns out it wasn't. That launched a multi-year, at least 5 years, 6 years of just having a little inch of her life, a little time period figured out. And then the pandemic came along and I had a little extra time on my hands. So I was able to kind of cull out more about her. And through an odd set of circumstances, unearthed her family who had her collection.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And in there were a couple of cans of film, one that survived. It was just starting to deteriorate, but the other one sadly disintegrated.
Oh my
But I
goodness.
was able to get a few images onto a flatbed scanner and get them digitized and blown up. And in there, we have proof that she was directing early Gasoline Alley films. It was thought that, oh no, it was just rumor, nothing was ever made. She did. She made them and directed them, and her family has confirmed that those were her babies. So,
Wow, that's incredible.
um,
Also,
yeah,
congratulations on
1920.
creating a theory and then, finding some
Yeah,
non-disintegrated film to prove it.
yeah. Um, it's not a huge collection, but
Yeah.
there's some remarkable things in there. And when you string together the elements and basic beats of her life, she was there at the very beginning.
Wow. Wow.
Well, the earliest days of
So it sounds like we
roughly
need
about.
to write some extra history in our animation history books here.
Oh yeah, it's changing.
That's
We
amazing.
are getting the other half of our collected animal history corrected. So
Yeah.
that's what I'll be speaking about at Toffee as well as at
Oh, that's so
Spark
cool. Well,
this year.
I'm gonna hang around for that chat at Taffy's. That's a local festival here. Okay, so I want to talk about Pencils versus Pixels, which is a new documentary
Yeah.
hand-drawn animation and how that evolved into computer animation. But first, I want to figure out why you've attached yourself to film and animation history, which is super interesting. I mean, you teach, you speak all around the world, et cetera, et cetera. You uncover, theoretical history and finance. Where does this drive come from?
You know, it evolved later in my life. I had been a musician for a number of years and an artist and a whole songwriter, a whole range of things. But I had worked for a number of years at the Disney company in pictures marketing and then moving into home entertainment when there was a home entertainment division. And I handled the global publicity for our classic animated titles. So I got to introduce new audiences to the great classics of Snow White and Cinderella and Peter Pan and Pinocchio and Dumbo, all of the greats, and got to work with many of the legends who are still with us. So it was, spending time traveling with them, getting them, hanging around at press events and I fell in love with it. I studied film and made films and worked within the industry for a long time, worked in television. And, but I just fell in love with the artists and the process of animation. I had worked briefly in animation at Disney in their television animation. I'd studied a little bit, but not that much. But once I got to working with the artists, and I mean legends, Tyrus Wong and Walt Paraguay, who was a character, and just so many great Blaine Gibson and Floyd Norman, and just so many of our great artists, and it just Richard Sherman, and it just fell in love with them. They're wonderful people who really never got the spotlight. And it's been a joy to be a part of. I enjoy casting light on hidden stories. And turns out, that was something I discovered as a byproduct in getting to do my job there. And so kind of fell into it in a way. But when you look at all the wide ranging worlds that I've moved in and things that I've done, everything sort of has brought me to this point. It's been a little circuitous, but it's brought me to this point. And I do come at it with a rather unique background and insight and kind of an odd expertise, a very unique expertise in a lot of ways. There are a lot of other really learned and knowledgeable historians out there And fortunately now people are starting to come together to work together about pooling their backgrounds and materials, research materials that they come across. And everybody seems to have their little fiefdoms and areas of expertise. But for the most part, people are getting a little more open about it and not quite as ultra protective.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. It's really great to see how things are evolving and being able to tap into an area that hadn't really been explored before in this industry. So
I like that you have, because a lot of historians are kind of textbook historians where they do the research and they read the books, but it sounds like you have a lot of firsthand personal relationship experience with these people, and even working for Disney and having access to the Disney vaults and all those things. I'm sure that gives you like you said, a unique perspective that you can't really
yeah,
get from just textbooks.
there's nothing like a good primary source, right?
Yeah.
Someone who actually was there in the room. And you'd be surprised, even at the archives, they have quite a bit there, but there's still a lot missing. When I first went into this studio archives, certainly working there as a publicist, I had a sense of what was there and would often go to the well to find new information and material. But um, when I started the ink and paint book in the area of women, they didn't have much at all. I'd asked to see everything on certain films and, going back to the early ledgers to find out, because much of the women's work was very materials based. Let's see where they were getting the material. And then I'd said, okay, and then I'll need everything on the ink and paint department and the women. And they had boxes of things on the films and they had stacks of ledgers to go through from the beginning. But when it came to the ink and paint teams and women and women's roles at the time, they had a folder with about 5 pieces of paper in it, and that was it.
My goodness.
So it just taught me at that point that history is recorded about, written, documented, and archived from a male perspective. Women, pretty girls who traced and colored, right? What's the big deal there? Well, turns out it was a pretty big deal. Women were doing extraordinary work. And in many ways, it's a large part of what we're seeing on the screen is their final artistry, and certainly not taking anything away from the men with pencils, but color and final form and the calligraphic precision of inking was just mind-blowing. But yet for decades, we had, that had been reduced down to a log line of pretty girls who traced and colored, and that was it. And turns out they did far more.
Right. Where do you even start to, when you have a folder with 5 pieces of information in it, and there's a huge wealth of history and people who had worked on these films, it sounds like a monumental task to recover all these things.
It was. I mean, we know that now, but it was years. It took years. And it's ongoing. I still get families and people reaching out and new materials that help fill in holes that, missing pieces. But we didn't, when you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah. Right,
oh yeah, we've
course.
got everything covered, right? But it was a bit of a task to kind of begin to unearth, wait a minute, there's quite a bit more here than what we knew. And that's typically how I start my lectures or presentations is I'm about to change what you think you know, because again, when you don't know what you don't know, everything's rosy and we've got it all answered. And yet there are deep areas that we have just begun to scratch the surface on.
So
which brings us to the film, I think.
Yeah. I guess one question before that is, animation historically was done a lot by Disney, like, siloed animation studios that were archiving things. But now you have
Really,
animation.
a lot of animation has been scattered to the winds.
Right. Well, I guess, yeah, my point is, or my question is, if it was difficult to document and archive how women were changing and working in animation back then, how going forward can it, can we accurately write history as it's, spreading around everywhere? I'm sure a lot of studios aren't documenting anything. What's your take on going forward to make sure that
It
we're
is
doing
hard,
this?
particularly at studios, to get. I know a few studios have finally, are initiating archivists, and particularly as we're in a digital age, you can certainly back things up, but the technology is shifting so fast that, you know, who has floppy disks anymore, right? So you're constantly updating your databases. I don't know that I'd want to be researching this time period because, how do you
Yeah, right. I don't even know where to start because, like, I have friends in
paper documents,
anime.
right? Give me animation paper to work with. Um, I think though we are at an important time, and there's still a lot of areas to be exploring. And when when I was approached to jump in on the film, and I came a bit later, uh, got a call from one of the producers who I knew from other documentary projects, live action, projects. And he said, Mindy, and I knew Tom and Tony had been working on this a while back. And then, life's change, world events unfold, pandemics occur. And I got a call from one of the producers who I knew, and he's like, Mindy, I got this project. And he goes, you're my first call. I'm so excited about it, but definitely need some help with. And we talked, and I said, great. I know, such an important time period, the renaissance of animation, which I do get to in the ink and paint book, and had done some, fortunately we still have people around from that time period that we can get to as primary sources. But a lot of the materials and a lot of the key people have already started to pass. And so it's important. We are in a race to kind of retain our own collective experiences sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I really deeply applauded the guys for starting this and getting it brought to the screen finally, because it is recent history, fairly recent history, but yet not. And if we don't document it, if we don't get it from people who were there, then we start to get these crazy myths and things that it's twice as hard to get them researched and dispelled as we move along. But I guess when I brought to the table, certainly was offering, based on my research, hopefully a little broader understanding. But I also feel, not that I'm the gender police, but when the guys came with what they'd had, I took a look at the list of interviews that had already occurred and went, let's balance this a little more, shall we?
Yeah.
Women were right there and some real powerhouses. And unfortunately, we had a short period of time to get this kind of brought together, but I quickly got on the phone and started calling around going, need you, need you, need you. Come on, ladies, let's get this going. And so I was able to get a wonderful group of remarkable, talented, and deeply experienced women animators and artists into the lineup as well, which I'm so excited about. And it's important, I think, for audiences today to see that range of diversity, particularly in this time period, because it's the films that many of my students, not that I'm that old, but my students grew up with. And we have a lot more women studying animation today, and it's important that they see that women had a strong hand in creating things that they feel are a part of their lives in such an important, impactful way. So
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you if you could give, maybe just a little bit of an overview of what the film, plans to accomplish. It's just by the name itself, pencils versus pixels. It sounds like it's covering, the transition from hand drawn to computer animation. And I'm curious, what your take and what you just kind of gave, you said you made sure there was a better woman perspective from this. But what is your take from that transitional period in the film that,
yeah,
we can look out for?
it's a very pivotal time in animation. And what's exciting, I think, don't let the title fool you in some ways. It really is a celebration of animation. And what's exciting is I think at the time that Tom and Tony had started it, 2D animation was considered out the door. All the major studios had said, nope, we're going digital. That's it. Everything is going to be digital, 3D, that's it. And that was heartbreaking for a lot of people. It required transition, retraining, new skills. A lot of really top talent said, no, I'm not even going there. I want to remain with pencils. But yet no one was really hiring. So many retired, many kind of ended their businesses, just completely changed what it really altered things. But what's exciting now, time has a way of sort of providing a longer look at what we think should be, we should move on from or not. And what's really exciting is that hand-drawn animation did not go out of style, will not go out of style, is a key crucial part of expression. And it's another just expanded part. Digital animation really did nothing more. Now we're learning, but it just expand the range of tools. You still have to have that master of, you can push buttons all day long, but if you can't wield a pencil right, forget about it, right? You have to have those basic skills. Get as much life drawing as you can, get it out there and draw, carry your sketchbook, keep going, do it. It may feel analog, great, so be it. But there's something really crucial about that. It's a primal thing. And I that was one of my first questions when I got the call about the film, if I could come on board. And I said, where are we at? Are we, confrontational about this transition, or are we celebrating? And I said, oh, no, it's a celebration, because look where we're at again. I said, great, I'm on board then. Let's do it. Because, when you look at it, the film makes the point that films like the Spider-Man series now, where you have all types of all forms of animation and expression, and hand drawn is really, it's full circle again. It's just another medium, another tool that storytellers have. Some stories are more inherent for that approach versus digital, and it just has the right quality in the medium for the story being told, which is great. As a storyteller, you want as many possible options, right? You want more Crayolas in your what is it, the 64 or 72 box of Crayolas
Yeah,
with
right.
the versus the 8 box, the big 8 box. It's just a wider range of creative possibilities.
I think that's great news, especially for people like me who like to be a 2D animator. Do you, you have ties to, some of the legends and experts. Do you see their still being like a golden age of 2D animation where we're going to get like, big legends like we used to have who are just super excelling in 2D animation? Because part of my
Oh,
thinking is, 2D animation is becoming much more niche. We have films like Klaus and the Spider-Verse uses it. Um, but we don't have like, uh, a
oh,
hot
you've got
house of
elements,
full-time.
an inventor, you have, yeah, I think you're going to find more of it. Now that it's sort of the pendulum has shifted back a little bit, things have balanced a bit, and um, it's kind of cost effective to pick up a pencil and paper
Right.
rather than sit down to your Wacom
five
tablet or
thousand dollar Wacom tablet,
right, right.
$5,000 computer, 5,000. Yeah,
Yeah, and if you need to create, if you need to, that tool is always going to be there.
yeah,
And I think it's not like it's not palatable to audiences. And what's interesting is there's software now that's trying to give you that analog look. It cracks me up when meeting with film archivists and everything, and it's like, oh no, it's too clean, it's too pristine, and they need to like reintroduce noise back into the film. Well, oh, okay.
so from your perspective, are you seeing I'm glad you mentioned the film The Inventor. That's yeah, because there's a the stop motion slash,
Yeah, this film, yeah.
yeah, slash 2D. Do you, and that was made in France, I believe. Do you see more international interest for 2D? Because, I
Oh,
see the US
yeah.
market, you've got like puppet animation, which is, very cost effective. And then you've got big studios creating, kind of like the Spider-Verse, for instance. But do you see more of an international interest in traditional hand-drawn animation? I
Oh,
mean, I still think
yeah.
there's so many cultures that and stories that aren't being shared in animation. Do you kind of
Well,
see this?
I think, if you get to I've been on a few juries and you see the work coming out, especially at student level. There's some powerhouse stuff coming out. Um, I, that's, I think, what's really exciting. We talk about another golden era, which would be our third golden era, I presume.
It's like another
Um,
one.
yeah, why not? um, I think it's interesting to see where we're headed with animation, and I see it as a wide open horizon. There's so many possibilities out there. Filmmakers at any point in their career, whether just beginning or deeply advanced, now have the tools right at their fingertips to be creating and distributing their work. They can get it to their audiences right away. You don't necessarily have to go the theatrical route, although we have that theatrical option. Streaming options, we'll see where that all unfolds. But it's exciting, and I think there's far more opportunity today than there ever has been. I think we need to, which is why when I'm teaching, I push the vitamins and minerals of storytelling a lot, and good at Cal Arts, we really push drawing. It's so important. I teach at another campus, Drexel University, which is very digitally based, which is great. It's more learning software and that kind of thing. I'm one of the few kind of analog classes there, and it's a providing an important mix. I think my students, when they get out into the world, feel a little more prepared, um, and I think we have a wider number of people interested in storytelling and with tools around them that they can get out there and do it with. When I was in film school, you had to have a, Panavision Gold package and very wealthy friends in order to make a film. And now you can pick up your cell phone and just get out there and start creating. It's exciting. And I'm anxious to see where the next generation takes us, what the new horizon is, what the new frontier is. Three-dimensional, immersive, VR,
Yeah.
AI. Once we get it wrangled, we'll see. Um, but there's a lot of really exciting possibilities. And in that wide open Wild West range of getting there, it's also important to look back at our past and recognize sort of the where we've come from. That's why I think Pencils versus Pixels right now is an important film, because it explores that time period where we, just that bringing us right over the threshold into a digital age, which is not quite, we take it for granted today, but it wasn't always the case. And it's got kind of a wonky, crazy sing song path that it came about. And I think it's important that we document that we get as many firsthand accounts with that. And knowing that, that'll help us move forward into this frontier, I think, in a wiser way.
Well, I'm curious. You teach, and there's this documentary that's coming out, which I'm super excited to watch as well. What do you think somebody gains from having a better historical perspective in animation versus somebody who doesn't have that perspective? Like somebody who just, they're just animating, they become an animator, blah, 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 versus somebody who they're animating, but they also, they have that historical perspective.
Oh, there's so much. One of my mantras, in a way, when I teach film history, I go back and cover a wide range of things from early silent cinema on up. And again, one of my theories is that everything out there today has been done before, more often than not done right the first time, right? So let's go look at the masters. Otherwise, you just end up reinventing the wheel and doing it in kind of an inferior method, right? So you go to any of the top filmmakers out there today, and they have a lexicon, they have a foundation to build on of Hitchcock and Buñuel and Scorsese, and just a whole body of work that has been built upon. And even watching many of the films out here at the festival that are newly restored or newly discovered, and we were watching a film, a French film that was made in 1918, and it made me think of, oh my gosh, I'm seeing Grapes of Wrath, which came out in the 30s, about the Dust Bowl and traveling across, 30s, 40s, early 40s. And you could just see the parallels just in some of the characterizations and the experiences of the people. And I thought, what we do is we build on, and we're influenced by it. And it's important that we're not copying, but in a way, a bit of an homage, but we build upon what we know, what we've grown up with. So one of the other things, I threw a lot of material at my students, and particularly a lot of artwork from different studios, different films, different artists, animators, and to gain a sense of style, time period historically, the UPA versus, some of the Toonder material coming out of the Netherlands in the 40s and 50s is kind of on parallel. There's some really, just learning, what does Mary Blair's artwork look like? How did she evolve as an artist? And but to give my students a vocabulary, a sense of how to be able to speak about certain time periods, and if you're going to give something a noir feel, what does that involve? Just to expand their visual lexicon a little bit, and their sense of and even expanding their own personal styles, but in a larger lexicon of influences and time periods, how certain looks evolved and what was big in the 30s. If a client comes in and says, "Oh, I need something typical of the 30s," great, you could Google a few things, but right away at their fingertips, they're going to have a sensibility and a few artists to get to, right?
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense. Building off of what people have already created, instead of, building off of present cliches in your mind of what you think might be like a film noir or whatnot, versus actually, knowing film noir, for instance. That makes a lot of sense to me. And especially when, when you said everything's already been done before, yeah, that makes sense. And why not, somebody else has already been on this journey. Why not build off of what they've done instead of coming to the same or lesser point that they got to and then creating something for yourself? So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I know we're a little bit tight on time and internet connections. So maybe one last question is, and I'm curious because you have you're very researched in this. How have you seen women in animation change throughout the years? You went from, very invisible workers to, you said things are scattered all over the place now. What is your perspective on how it's changed and where it's going, and maybe, some insights?
Well, for women, yeah. Gosh, I've only been doing this research maybe a decade or so on women specifically, researching animation and the larger world on that and film for many, many years, but really focusing on women has been 10 years is recent. I don't but in the course of that time, like I said, when I started, the prevailing attitude was there were 3 or 4 women who worked in animation, and it was only a long line of pretty girls who traced and colored. And now there's a resource. Well, there will soon be more resources to go to, including pencils versus pixels, because you'll have women there to hear and learn from and get their experiences during a rather pivotal time frame in animation. But the consciousness has changed. That's what's key. The unconscious bias of, I still talk to some of my dear beloved animation brethren, and when it's time to, like, yeah, we'll get a panel together, we'll do films, we'll get Bob and Steve and Jim and Harry and the list guys, and I'll have to stand there and go, excuse me, hold on, wait.
Yeah.
And be the gender police a little bit lovingly, and gently get them to understand that women were there too. And what's also changed, when women would get asked, oh no, I don't want to talk about my, oh no, but women are realizing more so now that yeah, I should be talking about my experiences. There are other women who need to hear about my experiences, that need to learn from that. The number of women training, as we've said, has changed. The industry needs a little push in certain areas in terms of hiring, and not to be afraid of women. We're not going to hurt you. We're going to actually bring our best to the table. But it's great to see the progress being made. We still have a ways to go, but there has been change. People are thinking differently. There are resources now that you can find that, hey, women have been there and have contributed quite a bit. And it's wonderful to see the difference that that's making. There's so much more that we are learning about our collected animated past, which is exciting. And one of the great tools that's out there now, one of the great experiences out there now, is pencils versus pixel. You've got extraordinary talent telling their tales, telling their stories, their experiences with animation, why we celebrate animation, why it's a key part of our movie going experience and always will be. And I think it fills an important void. It in an important way fills a void that that as recent as this 70s, 80s, 90s time period in that transition, it helps us to understand where we're headed in animation. And I'm excited to see what's ahead. But until then, we've got some great film to fill us in and get us ready for the future.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds, pixels versus pencils, pencils versus pixels. Sounds like a great resource of information of how that whole transition happened in the history, et cetera. So I'm super excited, and I'm glad, especially that you got the call list and said, hey, we need to have some more women
Yeah,
in this documentary. There's more perspectives than just men, so I'm excited
I'm
about that.
yeah, I'm grateful that they were eager and excited and listened to making that positive change. And I think you'll find that got some extraordinary talent and extraordinary voices there sharing their experiences. And like I said, it's a perennial tool that will be around for a while to help future generations understand that important transition as we face other transitions with technologies and facets that will come into storytelling and filmmaking and animation. This really highlights a pivotal time frame and can help us to understand as we transition through new technologies today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As we're wrapping up, is there anything else that you wanted to share? Last thoughts as we
Oh, stay tuned. There's great stuff
stay
ahead.
tuned. Yeah.
I've got a new, well, it'll be next year, a book ahead and a film ahead and a few other things I'm working on. But
You're keeping yourself super busy. A book, a film, teaching, conferences, speaking. Where do you
it's
find the time?
well, I tell you, somehow there's a lot of, I'm grateful for the give and take, the flexibility, um, and it's important stuff. And I'm deeply honored and humbled to get to do this. It's challenging at times. And it's a little tough, kind of on my own. I'm not supported through any major outlets necessarily, but it's important work, and I'm deeply honored to get to cast a light on some extraordinary people and who had otherwise been unsung, and to get their stories and experiences out to the world. So
Well,
stay tuned.
I'm going to stay tuned, and thank you very much for doing that. That's amazing and very honorable of you. And thank you for coming on. It's been interesting to hear why you do this, where you've come from. All the stuff you've uncovered along the way, I think, is amazing. Especially that tidbit you gave at the start about the first woman vaudeville film and recovering that. That's incredible. And being part of Pencils versus Pixels. This is all great. So
Well, there are a lot of early women. That's what the new book will be on. It's called The Only Woman Animator, Bessie Mae Kelly, and Women at the Dawn of an Industry. So stay tuned for that. But it does explore a wide range of women. It'll be eye-opening to a lot of people, I'm sure.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Great joy. Keep doing what you're doing. We need it.
Thank you. And if you're listening and you want to check out Mindy's work, I'm going to include her website, which is mindyjohnsoncreative.com. She's got a lot of cool resources on there, and she's going to post her upcoming work there. And I'm going to include some links to check out the documentary film Pencils versus Pixels as well. So please check out those links in the description of this chat. And that's all for now. So thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Willem Mendo and the graphics by Luhan Wang. I encourage you to look them up if you've enjoyed their work.